We're now happy to be joined via Skype by Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News, an expert on all things college basketball. And Mike, John Calipari has said this is a team that people are putting in the top 5, but maybe they ought to be drug tested. Do you think that Cal's exaggerating a little bit? Would you put them in the top 5?
Well, I think the first thing that has to be understood about preseason rankings is that they're not ranking teams as how they look in the preseason. I really could care less how a team performs on October 15th, or perhaps even I care a little bit more on November 15th, but not that much relative to my preseason rankings. They're about, what do I think is going to happen in the end? I mean, what difference does it make when I sit there in the summer along with my colleagues at Sporting News and we try to hash out these rankings? Do you really think we care what the teams are going to look like on November 15th? It's about who's going to win it. A year ago, we thought North Carolina and Kentucky were clearly the favorites to play for the national championship. One won it. The other one might have, if not for a late season injury. So we're not that far off a lot of the times. And in the case of Kentucky, they certainly are very much starting from scratch, starting with a very young group of players, very little experience, but they have a lot of talent. And as John has said many times, he likes where his team will be by the end of the season. So do we.
You talk about North Carolina last year. And Kentucky fans, I think the feeling is they have a great shot at a title this year, not because necessarily this team is as good as that team was to start out the gate, but there's a feeling, generally speaking, that maybe college basketball, in terms of elite teams, has taken a step back. And elite talent, you look at the All-American team that has guys from the Patriot League, the Missouri Valley, Ohio Valley League. Is that fair to say that college basketball does not have the elite teams and maybe the elite players that it had last season?
It's fair and accurate in my estimation. You look at what came in a year ago: Anthony Davis, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Marcus Teague, all to one team, all first-round draft choices just to one team, and there were several others, Bradley Beal, that were spread around to the rest of college basketball. That was just a freshman class, and then there were quite a few players in that instance who remained for their sophomore seasons. For instance, Jared Sullinger, Harrison Barnes. Those players deepened the field in college basketball. Thomas Robinson could have gone pro after his sophomore year, even though he hadn't played very much. He was certainly a draft prospect, not as high as he eventually became by playing another year and succeeding and making it very difficult for Kentucky to win a national championship. All of that made last season very rich, very deep, very competitive, and Kentucky needed to be a great team playing great in order to win the national championship. I think this year, more like 2011 or perhaps 2010, where you can be a very good team playing great at the end of the year and win it, as was the case with Duke and Connecticut.
When you look at UK, is there something that you say, if they're going to win the national title, this is something that has to happen from what you see in the preseason or the roster? Is there something that really jumps off the page that you say, you know what, to be a title team, Kentucky must prove that they can do this?
I think the first thing they have to do is they have to stay healthy, because they have no margin for error. And they were very fortunate a year ago with a slightly larger margin for error in terms of players off the bench. They were very fortunate a year ago to stay healthy, and that's a big part of why you win it. It's even more important for this team. Very little depth at point guard, very little depth in terms of the wings. They certainly have two high-class front-level centers who could play for anybody, although they're both freshmen. There's no question that either of those guys could start for any team in America. Not that they would necessarily beat out every other center, but they could start for every team in America, and that team would feel good about taking the floor. So having Willie Cauley, having Nerlens Noel, that's a great strength. But everywhere else, they need to stay 100% healthy.
When you look at the SEC, it seems like it's a league that, you know, every year when we talk about in October, November, you say this is the year it's going to be better. John Calipari says maybe 8 teams get in the tournament, maybe a little optimistic, but it seems like there are
8 teams in the tournament now. He wants us to be drug tested?
Yeah, that's a good point. He talks about these teams. It does seem, though, like the SEC has a couple of teams that are, you know, contenders, and I think of Missouri, Florida, Tennessee could be better, maybe Arkansas. When you look at that conference, How good can they be, not November 15th, but maybe, March 15th? And what teams pose a threat to Kentucky?
Well, I think Missouri poses a significant threat to Kentucky. This may be a season in which winning the regular season is going to be very difficult because of the nature of that team that will have to grow over time. And you have veteran teams with experience at Florida, at Missouri. Missouri does not have a lot of experience together, but they've got a lot of players who've played a significant amount of college basketball, even a guy who won a national championship, Alex Oriaki at Connecticut. So I think that they have maybe a little bit of an advantage on the regular season basis. I don't think that Florida or Missouri will go as deep into the NCAAs as Kentucky, or will be as potent in March, perhaps in the conference tournament. But that regular season, that every night kind of deal might be a little tougher. Kentucky, we all forget the Ole Miss loss when everybody was so frustrated in 2011. We forget it because that team went on, made the Final Four, won the SEC tournament. Everybody forgets that team struggled for a good part of the regular season just to find itself, just to find its bearings, and then eventually became a terrific team. I think there might be some moments for this team like that. I'm not predicting them necessarily. I'm just saying that it wouldn't be a surprise if this team took a little time to find its way to March, and perhaps somebody like a Missouri sneaked in and won the SEC title.
All right, Mike DeCourcy from Sporting News. Always a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much for joining us.
Happy to do it.